master tactician, actually, and obviously he was very big on what he called total non-violence.
Yes.
So he was very big on that, because obviously within India there was a wing which was interested in more militant activity, but he was very big on that, and he was very big on making sure that the movement maintained the sort of the moral high ground, which again is very important in politics. But I mean, what else do you remember about the guy, and what do you think Hong Kongers think about him?
I want to comment a bit about Gandhi's sense of non-violence. Well, we must draw some distinction between this very Indian concept, right? And certainly there's some influence of the Christian spirit into this, because Gandhi himself has acknowledged this, right? But with so-called, if we try to practice non-violence in Hong Kong, because we must understand that Chinese culture has another aspect. I must draw the distinction that non-violence doesn't mean timidity. Timid and timidity.
You're absolutely right.
And in Chinese culture, especially in Confucian-dominated society, timidity is something very, very obvious. Very an implicit but obvious thing. Now, in terms of this, non-violence doesn't mean timidity, right? But in Hong Kong, we usually confuse the two, because the Chinese people ourselves are basically quite timid in challenging the authority. So, if throwing a banana, they would interpret this as violence. Now, this is scandalous, because throwing a banana, right? Especially that one is a very important thing, right? Right, and doesn't mean that this is a kind of violent action and trying to instill some violence into some political system, because this is something because to express the depth of the emotion and the depth of anger against some very blatantly unjust and bad policy. And then this people must get their voice heard, and then sometimes they do some spectacular thing, but certainly we should draw a line of non-violence.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm particularly interested in getting Hong Kong people thinking a bit more and learning a bit more about different democracy movements in other countries. It helps a great deal, I think, to learn as much, do as much reading and watching films as you can, I think, to learn about other countries. In particular, you're absolutely right. Gandhi made people realise that you can be non-violent, but you can actually be active, what he called active resistance, in a completely non-violent way.
There's something also very important about Gandhi's stance of non-violence. Why it succeeds, actually, everybody who watched this film Gandhi will get this point across, because it's remarking that this echoes actually the Indian concept of non-violence and the Christian concept of non-violence has some deep resonance. So it actually appeals to the guilty conscience of the Christians in the British Empire, right? Especially the British government, so that they realize that they are doing some unjust colonial in India, and so that they withdraw.
Yeah, because I remember one scene in the film where peacefully marchers would walk up towards the policemen. They would walk up to the police, and they would not fight back. They would be totally quiet. They would just walk, and the policeman would hit them with a stick, and they'd fall to the ground. And that was a way, actually, they would win the moral argument in that way. You see, the government was being oppressive and unjust, and brutal, and so on. But another famous campaign is one you mentioned, to do with the salt tax march, where he led a group of people to walk 400 kilometers.
It's also one thing we should ask Hong Kong people. If for those people who are criticizing Yuk Man for throwing bananas and say that this was violence, I should ask them, if you really think some of the government policy is really bad, unjust, and then if you are not going to put up some really powerful non-violence resistance movement, how can you criticize Yuk Man and other people for doing this kind of spectacular thing, right? If you are not going to stop paying tax, for example, to the government in order to, for example, to protest about this so-called the medical financing scheme, right? The medical financing scheme is actually the mandatory provident fund in another disguise, right? And this is a kind of very unjust scheme. And then if you are not going to do something, for example, I refuse to pay tax in order to forbid this kind of unjust policy coming out, how are you going to get your voice heard? Right? Yeah. To make the government change its policy.
I mean, another point I would make is that I think Hong Kongers, Hong Kongers have to find their own way, I think, as well. I think what the tactics that worked in India, for example, wouldn't work in Hong Kong, I think. You've got to really understand your own culture, and you've got to really understand exactly what the government's doing, the oppression, and the laws that they use to oppress people. Because the famous march that Gandhi did to do with the salt tax, salt was a very big thing in India.
Yes.
The government controlled the salt industry. They wouldn't allow anyone to make their own salt.
Yeah.
It was illegal to make your own salt. So Gandhi went to the sea and he encouraged people to break the law by making their own salt. And it was a very powerful symbolic thing, as well as it's a massive political statement. And I think the Hong Kong democracy movement and activists, you've got to think a bit more about different ways which would really make an impact and would make a symbolic and political statement in the same way that Gandhi was kind of really thinking carefully about doing it there, I think. And ultimately, the democracy movement, you have to try to get the government to negotiate, if you like, because at the moment the government are, very strongly in power in Hong Kong, and it's just a matter of trying to constantly having a debate and think of more and more ideas to try to force the government to negotiate and to take power from the government. And it's an ongoing battle, and I think activists need to have this ongoing discussion about how in terms of the strategy and tactics that work best in Hong Kong. How are we doing for time again?
Yeah, we still have 4 minutes.
We've got 4 minutes. Anything else you want to say about that?
I want to raise an issue. Yes, these days is also still about this police protection of the people's lives in Hong Kong, because there are another 2 sex workers who are being murdered. Right? One is suspiciously another sex worker, but her identification has not been clear yet. But I have asked Jitang, the organization which helps out the sex workers, is last year we have 3 sex worker, 4 sex worker being murdered. Later they arrest a Pakistan immigrant, right? That properly account for 3 of the case, but 1 case was unsolved. So the person is at large now, right? Now we have 2 other cases, so it become quite alarming, because it seems we have a mini Jack the Ripper within our society now.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting that people it's invariably men, isn't it, who are attacking them? That they see a sex worker as an easy victim or as a weak person.
This
you see,
is also symptomatic, maybe about the so-called the spiritual split in our society, the tension between the conservative and the progressive in Hong Kong. That means the conservative Christians and the conservative people, they want the society to close up rather than opening up, right? By forbidding this domestic violence bill, including of gay couples and all these kinds of things, and then compulsory urine tests and all these kind of things, which actually cause the people to become split morally within their heart, whether they should do this kind of thing or not.
I think it's also the other way, politically change and politically spread down the ideology from the government, that they control the moral, the moral standard, and the group of church people to support maybe DAB or pro-government,
forming some kind of
and they mix them up together and manipulate it through a way that Christian equal to
conservative,
and also
equal to pro-establishment, pro-government.
pro-government
party.
It's similar to say that when you support George W. Bush means you support Christian. Yeah, that's sort of manipulation in America, isn't it?
Sure.
So
yeah, I mean, talking of George W. Bush, that fortunately in our next radio program we're going to have a new president, I think, aren't we? By the next program. So that's something to look forward to. That's a bit of positive news to finish on.
After the Lunar New Year.
That's after the New Year.
After the Lunar New Year.
Let's wish everybody.
恭喜發財.
Yeah.
恭喜發財.
恭喜發財.
恭喜發財. Yeah.
See you in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Happy Lunar New Year. Right.
Okay, and see you.
Bye.
Bye.